Hey, what's up, guys? It's Zach, and today I'm going to be talking about a topic that semi came up in a live stream the other day. It was more focused on like me. They asked who my influences were specifically in art, but I want to look at it in the culture as a whole. So originally, Condo's from Concord, New Hampshire, and he grew up enjoying classical music and play guitar, which is sounds pretty like sheltered and everything, and even kind of the aura he gives off is very like mild mannered. So you wouldn't expect what he did next. He moved to Boston and started playing in this punk synth band, which is just like the coolest thing ever. So shortly after moving to Boston, Condo met Jean-Michel, and Jean-Michel didn't know that Condo was a painter, and Condo didn't know that Jean-Michel was a painter. They just kind of connected over music because Jean-Michel's band actually opened for Condo's band. So shortly after that, Condo was like, "Yo, we got to go to New York." So he jetted to New York and well, packed up and went to New York. And when he got to New York, he got a job at a gallery just doing like not that important stuff, but just kind of like taking pictures and kind of just hanging stuff. And he was tasked with having to write an excerpt for an Andy Warhol exhibition. And so he wrote that, and Andy ended up reading it. And so Andy told his people that he liked it. So they just ended up having Kondo come and write about the whole show. And he never actually met Andy when he was at the show, but he did end up getting a job at Andy's factory. And if you know anything about Andy's factory, it is notoriously bad working conditions. Like the fumes were so bad that Andy wouldn't even want to stand there. If you're not familiar with this process, Andy Warhol's process also, like he didn't do a bunch of the hands-on like making of the stuff. He mainly just creative directed it, and like I said, over he liked to do it over the phone because he didn't even like to come in there because of the fumes. But other people run a bunch of this like screen prints and stuff like that that he would end up doing. So shortly after this, that Jean Michel and Kondo went to LA, and I think Kondo was just like painting a lot and hanging out with rappers and just like chilling and just having fun. And Jean Michel went back to New York, and then so Kondo realized that that was really boring, so he went to New York. And then once he got to New York, apparently Keith Haring and Andy Warhol had come to one of his shows, so and bought 6 pieces or something. So he ended up meeting Keith Haring and becoming friends. And he ended up meeting Warhol, and Warhol took photos of like Kondo working in the studio and everything. And the funny part is, Kondo never even told Warhol that he worked for him or anything. He said it was like too embarrassing, maybe, but I don't know.
I wanted to, but I thought, you know what? He probably maybe he would have thought I was a lousy artist if I told him I worked for him. That's the kind of guy he was, you know?
So shortly after this, then he moved to Paris, and I think originally he just wanted to go and like experience the art and the culture and everything. Like he spent a lot of time in the Louvre and things like that, just really examining old masters. And I don't know if this was his conscious thing of when he went there, but he ended up just kind of like going and forming these fake old masters, is what he coins them. And it's a technique of using it's like a postmodern assemblage of all these different styles where the style represents the psychological state at each point in the piece. So you may see a figure that is like broken up into multiple different sections where the nose may be from a Caravaggio, the cheek may be from a Vasquez, and the rest of the figure may be like a Cubist Picasso or something. So you may have just all these different things that like go together stylistically, kind of, but not really. And and there's a couple different ways in which Kondo goes on to describe this. Like he says that Picasso painted a violin from 4 different perspectives at one time, so he does the same with psychological states. And he's came to coin this style as psychological cubism and artificial realism, which I think is 2 great words. They very much describes like what conceptually he's doing. So when he was in Paris and kind of working through these styles, he was also friends with a bunch of writers and stuff. Like he was originally friends with this American writer who introduced him to who introduced him who introduced him who introduced him, and he ended up meeting a ton of people like Felix Guattari, who's a psychologist, and he ended up writing a lot on Kondo. And those works are kind of hard to find. I actually can't even find them. So if you know where any of that's at, point in my direction. But I can only find little quotes from that. But his work is great. If you're not familiar with it, you should definitely go check it out. And he also wrote and co-authored a bunch of stuff with Gilles Deleuze, who, if you're not familiar with Deleuze's book, The Fold, and you're into art or anything, you should definitely go check it out. It's very, very, very good and completely changes like my perspective on the way I thought about art. And before Kondo had even moved to Paris, he had actually already wrote a semi-manifesto of explaining his thinking behind artificial realism. I think it's called Notes on Artificial Realism. It's unpublished, so I don't think you're going to be able to get your hands on it. Also, that if you find it, send it my way. He had grounding in philosophy, and for instance, I'm pretty sure he was already familiar with Hegel and Heidegger and Nietzsche at this point, like who years later describes the thought process to an interviewer as it's like a cross between Hegel and Heidegger. The appearance of the painting suggests the being of the thing, and the simultaneous presence of various different psychological states adds up to what the object is. The interviewer then asks, right, and Heidegger? He says that's the idea of becoming. So you have this diversity of artistic influences in a picture, and they're in a process of becoming the painting, something different and autonomous from the influences that go into it. End quote. And that is such okay. So that is essentially the point that a lot of people have came to in contemporary times. And I think so to set the stage, for most of art history, you kind of had this buildup of realism. So you got to think when you're writing on a rock and you just have like another rock to write, it's pretty hard to draw someone's face photo accurate. Like, you know what I'm saying? So it took a long time of people just practicing and stuff and like painting, and this is why you have those old masters, and this is why you have people like Leonardo that are like really breaking down the anatomy and how to draw, because it is a very challenging thing. So you had this movement towards realism, and then the camera was invented, and it kind of why would you paint realistic when you could just take a picture? So then you had this movement towards abstraction, and this is why Picasso was such a big deal, is that like it was like going, and then he just goes Doop! Like he just did so much all at once, and that's why I think it was Bacon that was just like he was painting, and he's just like fuck Picasso. Um, but anyways, like you had this end up crescendoing at Kandinsky, which if you're not familiar with Kandinsky's work, he was kind of the I guess inventor of abstract art. So this was a little bit before Picasso, and then you had him kind of introducing abstract art, and then you had Malevich's Black Square. It is a black square. I very much appreciate it. I base my wardrobe off of it. But this is kind of what set the stage for like Warhol, Basquiat, and Condo, Keith Haring. Like you had this movement from um, pure abstraction back to realism, which actually is what it actually happens in philosophy too. We had this speculative turn where people started to move away from a lot of the ideas of the deconstructionalist, or just a lot of the postmodernist thinkers in general, especially like I was talking about Guattari and Deleuze, for instance, because Deleuze ended up like just one of the people he influenced, Manuel Delanda, who has a lot of good books and resources. Like he does a lot of or had a lot of lectures online. This is, like I said, that speculative turn is when a lot of people are slowly, because like I said, the public started to look at a lot of these postmodernist ideas of like being able to describe a whole system with just the parts in the system and stuff like that as kind of kitsch. It didn't seem in touch with reality. That's why a lot of people, like even to this day, just like make fun of a lot of like philosophical thinking and stuff. But it's because of like the way that is kind of looked at this point, which the swing back is good. This has given us a lot of things. Like I mentioned, Delanda would probably be thought of as like a new materialist, and then there's the speculative realist, which this is kind of two ways of battling the problem, or two ways of conquering the problem that Basquiat, Condo, Warhol, like all these people, this return of the new formalism, like what actually is material, what is the thing in itself, things like that. So this is the topics that are like Kondo had these things in his brain and was just wrestling with them for years and years and years before a lot of like, you know what I'm saying, before the public kind of catches up. And it's crazy how you see these things. I know it may seem like very abstract or academic, but it really does transfer to the way we think constantly. Like, not immediately, there is a slow lag, but like, even the way you think of, like, for example, fake news. Most of the people that say fake news don't necessarily read Lacan or didn't read Derrida or just any critical theory in general. They're not necessarily exposed to it directly, but it's more, I think that a lot of the postmodernist thinking kind of set the stage for everyone to just go ahead and think that way. So for instance, like if the intellectual mainstream just accepts that there is a lot of valid truths, that each person kind of has um, a own version of the truth. Not to say that there isn't some objective through lines, but if it is easy to say that each person has their own truth, that is goes a long way. It gets you three-quarters of the way to fake news. So it doesn't necessarily create fake news, but it sets the environment which people can just go that little bit further. And even Condo's commented on this himself. In 2017, he actually talked specifically about fake news and like even referenced a lot of the things he had wrote in 1988 and everything. So he said, I mean, you're watching a real TV listening, and they call it fake news. It's unbelievable. It just used to be an art concept, and now it's become a political concept. It's something that I unleashed into the arts, but it's sort of morphed into everyday life. I guess as a painter, I'm just on to other things now, but I'm shocked to see how much it caught on. Like, I think it was something that had definitely been in the public consciousness for a while. For instance, I think rap is one of the best examples. Well, entertainment in general, like you have like the rock and stuff now, but like I think hip hop in general has been the best at blending what's real and what's not even starts to become real. In later 2000s, George Condo got a call from Kanye West, and he wasn't familiar with Kanye. Like he said he was into like old school rap, wasn't familiar with Kanye, and he went to Hawaii to work on the covers for My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and I think he did five of them. And even after they worked together, Kondo made the comment in an interview that it was great to have Kanye West to work with. He works off my paintings, and my paintings work off his music. He does in music a lot of the stuff I do in painting: sampling, appropriating, presencing. He doesn't think of himself as a hip hop artist, but as an artist. Even his public persona is part of the art. It's another instrument he plays. See, even then, Kondo is recognizing that it is all a big performance also that is tied up in this artificially real, speculatively real version of reality that is art and it is real. So, like I said, I think it is something that sweeps broadly across the culture, and you see tons of hip hop artists drawn to him because of this. But I think because it's so easy to see similarities, you have Jay-Z reference him like quite a bit. Like I think Magna Carta Holy Grail had a line about it, and like even in 2020, Travis Scott's franchise cover was done by Kondo, which is which is also super cool, and hopefully they'll be doing the new cover for Travis's album. And like West Side Gun references them all the time. There's just so many ways you see this concept seep into the culture. Like I pointed out fake news, but like you just see everything from this time start to seep in. Like ad. Deleuze's concept of the virtual ad. And then now you're seeing like augmented reality, virtual reality. Like we start having to think of our environment as communicating back and us being able to like, you know what I'm saying, engineer it as we go. So, and that's some of the stuff I'll be touching on eventually, like some of the technologies and like different avenues that are kind of opening up. Like a lot of stuff's getting really crazy, like the League of Legends band. That blows my mind because it's like a VR band, and now it's like you're almost able to like perpetually create music through that, like a Gorillaz type thing, but it like doesn't even have a specific artist now. It's just like owned by a company. So then now it's like, what is that? Is that art? Is that how is that judged? Is that what is that? Yeah. So be sure to check that out. I appreciate y'all checking this out. Be sure to I don't know buy George Condo if you get stupid rich or